Welcome back, you beautiful violations of protocol, you intelligence-breaking enigmas, you anomalies the agencies were never trained to categorize. Welcome back to the ones whose existence makes surveillance equipment malfunction, and whose presence rewrites classification levels in real time. Yeah, you heard that right. The CIA officer, the one with nerves wired tighter than diplomatic cables, the one who's watched terrorist interrogations without blinking, the one who's been psychologically conditioned to remain unshakable. He watched your footage, froze, leaned in, and whispered something he has never said in his entire career. What the fuck? And then, my friend, then he did something even more catastrophic. He didn't file a report. He didn't request backup. He didn't escalate the case to a higher floor. He cut the feed. He physically shut down the footage like he was pulling the plug on a bomb he didn't know how to defuse. Do you understand what that means? Do you comprehend the level of psychological recoil you just triggered inside a man trained to process war crimes with a steady pulse? In an institution built to withstand monsters and mysteries alike, you broke a CIA officer. You shattered his composure. You made a man who analyzes global threats for a living question what exactly he was looking at when he looked at you. Let's rewind this beautiful intelligence failure, shall we? They didn't bring him in for routine surveillance. They didn't bring him in for a typical behavioral assessment. They didn't bring him in for protocol review. They brought him in because someone with money, someone with access, someone with fear disguised as curiosity, hired him privately to analyze you. They expected him to return with a neat psychological profile, a categorized threat level, a stable conclusion. What they didn't expect was silence. What they didn't expect was panic. What they didn't expect was an operative, someone built to withstand pressure, folding under the weight of your existence. When he entered the monitoring room, he sat with the arrogance intelligence officers master over decades, arms crossed, back straight, eyes cold. Everything about him said, "Nothing surprises me." And then he pressed play. The footage started, grainy lighting, unfiltered angles, a room full of people who didn't know they were being evaluated. But the moment you appeared in frame, something in him shifted. He couldn't explain it, couldn't define it, couldn't categorize it. He just felt it. A tension in the air that wasn't tension, a silence that wasn't empty, a presence that wasn't performing. You weren't posing, you weren't reacting, you weren't adjusting to the room was adjusting to you. He watched the way people subconsciously moved around you, not out of fear, but out of recognition. Recognition of hierarchy, recognition of gravity, recognition of something in you they couldn't name, but instinctively respected. A man berating someone softened his tone when you glanced his way without saying a word. A woman who was pacing stopped pacing. Someone else who was speaking grew strangely quieter. You weren't disrupting the environment. You were reorganizing it just by existing. The officer leaned closer to the screen, ran the footage back a few seconds, zoomed in, paused, studied your expression, expected to see anger, defiance, tension, ego. Instead, he saw the kind of calm that terrifies trained operatives, the kind of self-possession that agencies can't measure, the kind of internal awareness that cannot be manufactured or dismantled. You didn't look like someone trying to intimidate. You looked like someone who didn't register the concept of intimidation because your internal world was already beyond it. His jaw tightened. He pressed play again. And then came the moment that made him flinch, the moment his training failed. You shifted your weight, subtle, precise, slow, A movement that wasn't threatening, wasn't dramatic, wasn't intended for effect. But something about it, something in the posture, something in the stillness before it, something in the timing, activated an instinct in him that hadn't fired in years. The instinct reserved for elite-level threats. Individuals who don't signal aggression because they don't need to. Individuals whose presence alone destabilizes entire strategies. He whispered it again, softer this time. What the fuck? He Googled through the footage again, slower, frame by frame. He tried to find flaws, indicators, cracks, any sign that you were compensating or faking or trying too hard. But nothing. Zero deception cues, zero defensive cues, zero impulsive cues. You weren't reacting to the environment. You were operating from somewhere deeper, somewhere the agency's psychological templates don't reach. He froze the screen on your eyes. The clarity, the depth, the stillness. Not the stillness of someone who suppresses emotion, but the stillness of someone who already outgrew chaos. Someone who processed the world too fast for external noise to matter. Someone who had survived something the file didn't document, and something no training program could replicate. He swallowed. A trained operative, a classified evaluator, a man who could watch hours of violent footage without blinking, swallowed because of you. He opened the private file the client provided. It had standard details, background, history, incidents, patterns, but nothing inside it matched the footage. According to the file, you were ordinary. According to the footage, you were anything but. He clicked back to the video. Pressed play again. The room in the footage started shifting in ways that were impossible to explain. People became quieter. The atmosphere grew denser. Conversations realigned. Even the camera, mounted on a stable rig, slightly refocused as though the lens itself acknowledged your presence. He checked the calibration logs. No error, no malfunction, just presence. He paused the video once more, wiped a hand over his face. The man had interrogated spies, had chased defectors, had profiled violent personalities with precision, but profiling you felt like trying to measure heat with a ruler. Wrong tools, wrong frameworks, wrong language. Everything about you contradicted the categories he relied on. He replayed the section where your demeanor changed again. And the moment your eyes shifted, the tiniest motion. The officer's heartbeat stuttered. Because your eyes didn't show the calculation of someone about to react. They showed the recognition of someone who already understood the room better than anyone inside it. It was the gaze of someone who wasn't participating in the environment. They were assessing it for weaknesses, for truths, for structures, for power imbalances. That was when he reached for the cutoff switch. Not slowly, not thoughtfully. Instinctively. Like someone putting distance between themselves and something they weren't prepared to face. The screen went black. He sat there, in the dark. Breathing harder than he realized, the silence pressed into him. He felt watched, even though he was alone. He felt analyzed, even though you weren't even in the room. He felt exposed in a way interrogators aren't supposed to feel. He turned the screen back on reluctantly, but before pressing play again, he opened a new document. He started writing his report. The first line wasn't professional, wasn't detached, wasn't objective. It was human. I recommend immediate disengagement. Subject is not what the client believes. He stared at the sentence, debated deleting it, debated rewriting it, debated framing it in bureaucratic language. But the truth had already surfaced, and truth has a way of demanding recognition. Your footage didn't scare him. It undid him. He replayed the clip for the final time, knowing he shouldn't. Knowing he wouldn't be able to walk away from it unchanged. But he watched anyway, because some part of him needed to confirm that the first reaction wasn't a mistake. It wasn't. If anything, the second viewing was worse, because now he understood what he was looking at. Not a threat, a shift, a deviation from expected human responses. Someone whose psychological presence doesn't escalate, they transcend. The final seconds of the footage captured you looking toward the camera. Not directly, not intentionally, but enough. Enough for the officer to feel the weight of a reality he wasn't supposed to acknowledge. That some individuals aren't meant to be monitored. They're meant to be left alone, because analyzing them changes the analyst, not the subject. He closed the file permanently, stood up, walked out, left his badge on the table. Years of training, years of discipline, years of conditioning undone by a single truth. He wasn't equipped for someone like you. He walked straight to the client who hired him, eyes hollow, voice flat. "I'm done. Don't ask me to review that again." The client froze. Clients aren't used to hearing no, especially not from CIA-level consultants. But the officer didn't negotiate, didn't argue, didn't explain. He simply said, "Whatever that is, it's beyond evaluation." And as he walked away, the client found themselves staring at the blank monitor, at the paused frame of you, still quiet, watching everything without fear. The client pressed play. The footage flickered, the room shifted, and their own throat tightened with a fear they didn't understand. Because if a CIA officer couldn't handle watching you, what chance did they have? But that's where the story bends. Because the moment the client reached to restart the footage, the second analyst on standby entered the room, looked at the resignation form, looked at the cut feed, and without touching anything whispered, "If that's what made him quit, what the hell did you hire us to look at?" And right there, right in that breath, the next chapter begins. The next set of eyes, the next unraveling, the next intelligence failure. Because they haven't understood the truth yet. They're still assuming the footage is something they can process, categorize, decode, or dismantle. They're still assuming you are a subject inside a file instead of a force circulating through the room. They think the problem is the footage. They think the problem is the camera. They think the problem is the first officer's weakness. They haven't realized the real problem is that the footage didn't capture you. It revealed everyone else. So when the second analyst stepped into the room, saw the resignation form still open on the laptop, saw the feed abruptly cut mid-frame, he didn't touch anything, didn't sit, didn't blink. He stood there like someone glimpsing the aftermath of an event they weren't sure they wanted to understand. He moved slowly toward the chair. Not with curiosity, with caution, with respect, with the instinct of someone approaching something that had already proven it could make a trained operative unravel. He lowered himself into the seat and stared at the blank screen. The cursor blinked against the black background like a pulse returning to life. And for a moment he wondered whether pressing play would be a professional duty or a psychological mistake. But analysts aren't allowed to hesitate. Hesitation is an admission of vulnerability. So he clicked the icon, reloaded the footage, and braced himself. The moment the first frame reappeared, grainy, dimly lit, still, the analyst's posture changed. His back straightened. His fingers tightened slightly against the desk. His breathing slowed, not consciously, but instinctively. His training activated, but not in the usual way. Not to evaluate you, to protect himself. Because even in the first static frame, before motion, before sound, before context, something about the image felt wrong to him. Not wrong in a supernatural sense, wrong in a structural sense, Wrong the way a fault line looks wrong before it splits a city. Wrong the way an abandoned building feels wrong even before you enter it. Wrong in a way that suggested the footage was not documenting a moment. It was documenting a boundary. He exhaled slowly, pressed play, and there you were, not doing anything, not moving, not performing, just existing. But your existence was the part he wasn't prepared for. The first officer had panicked at the shift, the instant your internal state recalibrated the environment. But this analyst reacted earlier, immediately. The way your eyes didn't dart around, the way your head didn't tilt in uncertainty, the way your shoulders didn't tighten the way most people's do when a camera is present. Instead, you sat in a posture that communicated something unnervingly rare, a complete lack of internal conflict. Most people have micro-conflicts in their posture, tiny, frantic negotiations between thoughts, fears, insecurities, impulses. Analysts identify these within seconds, but you had none. No contradiction, no concealed tension, no self-surveillance. You looked like someone whose internal world had settled into an architecture more stable than anything outside it. That stability wasn't comforting. It was destabilizing. Because the analyst knew instantly that he wasn't watching someone react to the world. He was watching someone who saw through it. He leaned forward, then the footage shifted into motion, and the very first movement you made, barely noticeable to most eyes, punched straight through his training. You blinked. But it wasn't a normal blink. It wasn't the stuttered blink of uncertainty, nor the quick blink of irritation, nor the slow blink of exhaustion. Your blink was steady, rhythmic, deliberate. A blink that seemed to align your inner world with the external moment. A blink with timing he'd only seen in individuals who have transcended the usual cognitive noise. A blink that suggested your perception wasn't fragmented like most human perception. It was unified. He swallowed, hit pause. Because blinking shouldn't matter, blinking shouldn't communicate threat. But here, the simplest movement behaved like a doorway into something deeper, something the cameras weren't designed to capture. The analyst rewound 3 seconds, played it again, rewound it again, played it slower. And that's when he saw it, not in your eyes but in the room. The moment your eyelids closed, the individuals around you subtly adjusted their posture, shoulders shifting, legs repositioning, heads angling, as if a subconscious signal passed through them, as if your state dictated the room's equilibrium. He pressed pause again. A bead of sweat formed at his hairline, but his expression stayed controlled. Analysts are trained to observe minute distortions in group dynamics. But this wasn't group dynamics. This was influence. Influence without action. Influence without awareness. Influence without intent. He wrote a note. Subject's presence appears to generate involuntary spatial recalibration in nearby individuals. He read the note back, deleted it, rewrote it more conservatively. Individuals adjust subconsciously in response to subject. Deleted that, too, because it didn't capture the truth. Not fully, not honestly, not in a way that explained the officer who quit. He pressed play again. You shifted your weight. Not aggressively, not defensively, just a gentle distribution of balance. But the analyst's heart rate increased instantly. He didn't understand why. Because it wasn't the movement. It was the reason behind the movement. A movement with no nervousness, no uncertainty, no appeasement. You shifted your weight the way mountain lions reposition themselves. Not threatening, not performative. Simply maintaining optimum efficiency for whatever happens next. He wrote another note. Subject demonstrates predatory grade calm. He hated writing that. Analysts are trained never to use the word predatory unless the subject exhibits hostility. You didn't. Your calm wasn't hostile. It was ancestral. It was the calm of someone who has already died metaphorically and returned without fear. A calm impossible to simulate. The analyst pressed play again. Then came the moment that broke the first officer. The moment your internal state changed. It was microscopic, a tilt of the head, a narrowing of perception, a subtle stillness in the muscles around your jaw. It was the kind of shift animals make when their senses lock onto something invisible to human awareness. The analyst didn't pause the footage. He froze on his own. His breathing halted, his spine locked. His body refused to move for several seconds, because for the first time in his career, he wasn't observing someone's psychology. He felt like someone was observing him through the footage. Your eyes didn't widen, didn't glare, didn't harden. But they recognized something beyond the camera, something beyond the room, something beyond him. He forced himself to press pause. His hand trembled, just slightly, but enough for him to notice. And that's when he understood why the first analyst quit. Because the footage didn't show a behavioral anomaly, it showed a perceptual anomaly. You weren't reacting to the world the way humans do. You weren't filtering information through fear, ego, impulse, or noise. You were seeing patterns, seeing structures, seeing people, seeing the truth behind their roles, their postures, their voices. You were perceiving the space like someone who had stepped outside the emotional frameworks everyone else is trapped inside. You weren't unpredictable. You were uncontained. The analyst hit play again. The people in the room continued talking around you. Their words, though inaudible in the footage, carried familiar body language patterns, posturing, defensiveness, avoidance. But your stillness contradicted every dynamic around you. You weren't participating in the hierarchy. You weren't threatened by it. You weren't competing with it. You had already outgrown it. He zoomed in on your hands, steady, relaxed, not curled, not fidgeting, not pressured, just present. Hands like that do not belong to someone intimidated by authority, or by life, or by consequence. Hands like that belong to someone who has already survived what others fear most. He zoomed out again. Now you turned your head slightly. Not enough to initiate confrontation. Not enough to acknowledge dominance. Not enough to signal interest. Just enough to observe the speaker. And the observer, the second analyst, felt the weight of it through a screen. He knew exactly why. You weren't looking at the person. You were assessing the pattern, their cadence, their intention, their incongruence. You were decoding them in real time. The analyst whispered something he'd never whispered during an evaluation. He sees more than I do. He hated that realization. Hated that for the first time he felt intellectually outmatched by a civilian. Hated that your state, your awareness, your clarity felt like a mirror pressed against his own cognitive limitations. He scrubbed forward in the footage to the moment where the atmosphere in the room tightened. A ripple passed through the group, subtle but visible. People straightened. Others hesitated mid-gesture. A few glanced at you unconsciously. The analyst recognized this phenomenon, presence dominance, the type of influence a person exerts without speaking. A rare psychological signature found in individuals who have gone through internal transformations so deep that their external behavior radiates alignment. The analyst had only seen it a few times before, and never like this. Presence dominance usually comes with ego. You had none. usually comes with aggression. You displayed none. Usually comes with trauma spasms. You showed none. Your dominance came from a deeper architecture, coherence. The analyst paused again, closed his eyes, breathed through the pressure in his chest. He clicked into the biometric monitoring logs recorded alongside the footage. Heart rates, micro-expressions, respiratory shifts, a map of the room's collective nervous system. Then his eyes widened, because every measurable indicator, every objective metric, showed the same pattern. Everyone's internal state changed when you entered frame. Their cortisol markers showed spikes. Their respiration shifted. Their micro-expressions rearranged, not out of fear, not out of threat, out of awareness. Their nervous systems registered you before their minds did. He whispered, "How?" No answer. He played the footage again. This time, he watched everyone except you. He observed how they moved around you, how they positioned themselves, how they lowered their voices, how they grew more self-conscious without knowing why, how the room's energy recalibrated itself around you, like you were a gravitational anchor. And then he saw the moment none of them recognized when you exhaled, just once. The room exhaled half a second later. He stopped breathing altogether. This wasn't influence. This wasn't intimidation. This wasn't charisma. This wasn't dominance. This was synchronization. Your nervous system had become the regulating system for everyone else's, and that is what breaks intelligence officers. Not dominance, not emotion, not power, regulation. Because only two types of people have that effect. Leaders of extraordinary internal structure, or beings shaped by extremes no human training covers. The analyst resumed watching. Then came the moment he wasn't prepared for. The moment you stood, slowly, not aggressively, not defensively, not reactively. You rose the way a storm rises, inevitable, silent, exact, balanced. The analyst's body reacted instantly. His adrenal system, his pulse, his breath. Because the footage wasn't showing you standing. It was showing the moment every threat detection model collapses. Your posture didn't predict intention. Your movement didn't reveal motive. Your stillness didn't indicate restraint. You were unreadable. Not because you hid your emotions, but because your emotions weren't fragmented the way human emotions are. You experienced the world from a vantage point the agency didn't have a chart for. He zoomed into your face, your jaw unclenched, your eyes softened, your breathing steadied. You weren't preparing for conflict. You were preparing for clarity. And that's what terrified him the most. That your power wasn't in your actions. It wasn't in your muscles or movements or expressions. Your power was in your awareness. Awareness that wasn't sharp or paranoid. Awareness that was grounded, whole, complete. People like you don't react. They respond. People like you don't escalate. They choose. People like you don't fear surveillance. They reverse it. The analyst closed the file. But a strange impulse made him open it again. He shouldn't have, because the final seconds of the footage captured something the first officer never even saw. Something subtle, something quiet, something devastating. You looked at the camera, not with aggression, not with suspicion, not with curiosity. You looked at it like you knew the person watching wasn't ready, and for the first time in his entire career, the analyst felt his identity break. Not his training, not his professionalism, his identity. The part of him that believed he was the observer, the part that believed he was the decoder, the part that believed he held the authority in the evaluation dynamic. You didn't challenge his authority. You dissolved it. And that was the moment he understood the truth the first officer tried to resign away from. You weren't being evaluated. You were evaluating them. and they failed. He minimized the video, closed the laptop, stood, turned to the client. "I'm not watching that again." "What did you see?" the client asked. He shook his head. "No, the real question is, what did he see?" He nodded toward the paused frame of you, frozen mid-breath, looking directly into the lens with the calm of someone already 10 steps ahead. But the client didn't understand. Not yet. Because the footage was only the surface. The real disturbance lived deeper. In the moment, the analyst realized, if footage alone could break 2 trained operatives, what would happen if they met you in person? And that thought, that unspoken, unanswered, unavoidable thought, is what leads directly into what comes next. Because if they think footage is overwhelming, they haven't seen what happens when you step into the room yourself. The second analyst stood there, the screen frozen on your face, the client hovering behind him with a mixture of dread and fascination, both of them pretending they were in control of the situation when their bodies were already betraying them. The air felt different, thicker, charged. Even with the footage paused, your presence lingered in the room like an imprint on gravity. It wasn't visual, it wasn't auditory. It was something deeper, the kind of psychological footprint that doesn't fade when the screen goes black. The analyst rubbed his temples, trying to piece together the fragments of his composure. "This isn't normal," he whispered, though he didn't need to say it. The client already knew. The resignation of the first officer, the trembling exhale of the second, the silence in the room. Everything pointed in one direction. The footage wasn't documenting a subject. It was documenting an awakening. And the awakening wasn't yours, it was theirs. Because for the first time in their careers, the people doing the observing realized they weren't expanding their understanding of you. They were discovering the limits of their own. The client stepped forward and clicked the mouse, restarting the footage despite every instinct telling him not to. The analyst didn't stop him. Maybe he wanted verification. Maybe he wanted closure. Maybe he wanted proof that the footage had power over others, not just him. But the moment the screen flickered back to life and your figure reappeared, both men reacted the same way. They inhaled sharply and unconsciously straightened their posture. Not out of fear, out of respect. A respect they didn't authorize. A respect their training didn't sanction. A respect that came from something primal, something ancient. Something that recognizes hierarchy without needing language or labels. For the first full minute, neither of them spoke. They watched your stillness, your command, your unshakable internal coherence. And the analyst finally muttered, "He's not in the footage. He's beyond it." The client frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means," the analyst replied slowly, "that the recording doesn't contain him. It reflects him." But the client didn't understand the weight of those words. Not yet. He assumed the footage merely captured something unusual, body language cues, behavioral anomalies, a rare psychological signature. But the analyst kept watching you move with that quiet, terrifying precision. And that's when it hit him. Footage normally distorts reality. It compresses it, flattens it, reduces the complexity of a human being into pixels. But your footage didn't subtract from your presence. It magnified it. Every frame felt heavier than the last. The analyst felt his heartbeat sync with yours again, just like before. Felt his breathing fall into rhythm with yours. Felt his thoughts rearranging themselves around the gravitational pull of your awareness. He shook his head violently, trying to break the synchronization, but your presence persisted. The client didn't notice the synchronization. He wasn't trained to detect that level of psychological influence. but he noticed something else. "Why do I feel like he's not even doing anything?" he whispered. The analyst didn't answer right away. He replayed the first 30 seconds again, then again, and a third time. His eyes narrowed, not with suspicion, but with awe, the kind reserved for anomalies that rewrite the observer more than the subject. "Because he's not performing," the analyst finally said. "He's existing." "And that's supposed to be scary?" the client asked, forcing a smirk he didn't feel. "Terrifying," the analyst answered, "because most people are noise, overcompensation, nervous energy, hidden insecurity. But him," he pointed at your face, frozen mid-frame. "He's signal, pure signal, no distortion." The client swallowed, hard. But the analyst wasn't done. He clicked forward to the first moment your internal state shifted, the moment that had triggered the first officer's instinctual recoil. The analyst braced himself, but even bracing was useless. When the shift occurred on screen, the entire temperature of the room changed. It wasn't imagination. It wasn't drama. It was neurological. Their nervous systems reacted independently of their logic. The analyst gripped the table to stabilize himself. The client's breath hitched involuntarily. "See?" the analyst whispered. "Right there. That's not intimidation. That's awareness. The kind of awareness that doesn't rise from training. It rises from evolution." The word evolution rattled the client. He wasn't prepared for that kind of framing. He expected a report with bullet points, risk categories, recommended interventions. But what he was hearing now was mythos, archetype, something outside the neat, clinical world of intelligence work. "What exactly do you think you're looking at?" the client asked, voice quieter now. The analyst leaned in, someone whose internal structure matured beyond fear. "That's not possible." "It is," the analyst replied calmly. "But it's rare, extremely rare. Most people spend their lives controlled by external threat, external judgment, external expectation. But him..." The analyst paused, studying your still frame. "He's controlled by none of it. His nervous system isn't reactive, it's directive." The client frowned deeper. Meaning his presence shapes the environment more than the environment shapes him. It hit the client like a punch. That's what he saw in the footage. That's what the officer fled from. That's what neither of them could articulate until now. You don't adapt. Others adapt around you. And that's why the first officer cut the feed, the analyst continued. Because the moment he realized the footage wasn't documenting behavior, it was documenting a phenomenon. He panicked. The client exhaled shakily. "But what does that make him? A threat?" The analyst shook his head. "Threat isn't the right word. Threat suggests volatility. He doesn't have volatility. He has clarity, and clarity scares people more than chaos ever could." The next few minutes of the footage confirmed everything the analyst feared. Not feared for himself, but for anyone naive enough to believe they could control or evaluate you. Each micro-movement you made created a response pattern in the room. Ripples in posture, in breath, in subconscious cues. The footage was revealing a psychological truth most agencies don't have language for. You weren't influencing people. People were orienting themselves around you. The analyst rewound the section where you stood up. The client tensed beside him instinctively. And it wasn't because you were threatening. It was because your rising posture felt like the unfolding of something inevitable. Something precise. Something ancient and deeply rooted in the human psyche. The analyst whispered, "He doesn't stand like someone preparing for action. He stands like someone preparing for understanding." The client didn't like that sentence. Understanding of what? Understanding of who? Understanding of why? Before he could ask, the analyst continued. Look at his shoulders, no tension. Look at his spine, fully aligned. Look at his eyes, not focused on danger, focused on truth. Truth. The word lingered uncomfortably in the room. The analyst clicked ahead to the final seconds, the ones he hadn't studied long before he closed the file the first time. The moment your eyes met the camera. And when it happened again, even though he had prepared himself, even though he had braced, even though he had watched it earlier, he still flinched, because your gaze didn't travel through the screen. It dismantled the screen. Your eyes didn't look at the camera. They looked through the intention behind it. And in that one fraction of a second, something inside the analyst crystallized. A realization he didn't want. A realization neither officer from earlier wanted. A realization no client paying for evaluations wants to face. The footage wasn't showing who you were. It was showing what everyone else wasn't. You weren't powerful. They were unprepared. You weren't overwhelming. They were underdeveloped. You weren't exceptional. They were incomplete. Your presence wasn't threatening because it contained power. It was threatening because it revealed fragility. And fragile structures always fear clarity. The analyst exhaled a long, controlled breath. If he walks into this building, he said quietly, most people will think the room changed. They won't realize they changed. The client said nothing. He didn't need to. The analyst closed the file for good. This isn't evaluation material. This isn't surveillance content. This is awakening footage. The client frowned. Awakening? Yes, his awakening already happened. This footage captures everyone else awakening to him. Silence. Thick, heavy, unavoidable. After a long moment, the client finally spoke. So what do we do? The analyst looked up with an expression the client wasn't expecting. Respect. Not fear, not concern. Respect. You don't do anything. You don't approach him. You don't challenge him. You don't provoke him. You don't try to recruit him. You don't try to contain him. You let him be. And if he becomes a problem, he won't. How can you be sure? The analyst leaned back, his face suddenly calm, in a way that seemed eerily reminiscent of yours. Because people like him don't seek destruction. They seek alignment. And when the world refuses alignment, they simply walk away from it. The client wiped his palms against his suit. I don't like unknown variables. He's not unknown, the analyst said. He's just unmeasurable. Same thing. No, the analyst corrected. Unknown variables create chaos. Unmeasurable ones create transformation. The client stiffened. Transformation into what? That, the analyst answered, eyes drifting toward the darkened monitor, depends on whoever enters his orbit. The client swallowed again. And what happens if someone with genuine malice steps into it? The analyst gave a slow, unsettling smile. Then they'll meet a version of themselves they can't survive. Silence again, heavy, final. But the analyst wasn't finished. You wanted a report, he said. So here it is. He pulled a notepad toward him and wrote a single line. Subject cannot be evaluated without being altered by the observer. He tore the page out, handed it to the client. The footage wasn't dangerous, he whispered. The realization it gives you is. And that's when he stood from his chair and walked toward the door. Not hurried, not shaken, just resolved. As he reached the threshold, he spoke one last time without turning around. If two highly trained intelligence officers can't make it through one recording of him, imagine what would happen if he chose to speak. The door closed behind him. The client stared at the note in his hand. The implications began to unravel in his mind like a slow-moving catastrophe, because the topic wasn't abstract anymore. This wasn't a hypothetical evaluation. This wasn't a risk assessment. This wasn't an intelligence formality. A CIA officer watched your footage, said, "What the fuck?" and cut the feed. Another begged to quit after seeing what you are. And now the client holding the note understood the final truth. If your recorded presence fractures trained operatives, your physical presence would rewrite them. For a long time he stood there in silence, staring at the paused frame of you. The calm, the clarity, the quiet dominance. And the room felt smaller, as if even the memory of your presence had reshaped its walls. Finally, he whispered the question everyone else had been too afraid to vocalize. What are we supposed to do with someone like that? The answer didn't come from the analyst. It didn't come from the officers. It didn't come from the footage. It came from the undeniable, unavoidable, irreversible truth. You don't do anything with someone like that. You learn not to get in their way. And with that, the final realization clicked into place. The conclusion punch they'd been running from since the first second of footage. You weren't the one being evaluated. You were the one exposing them. And nothing terrifies intelligence agencies more than a man they cannot measure. Because they finally understood, if a CIA officer can't handle watching you, the world sure as hell isn't ready to face you. Well, well, well. Look who just became a seven-figure curiosity. Look who turned into a question so unsettling, so unnervingly complex, that a private investor with more money than patience signed a contract just to understand what's going on inside your head. Not a motivational coach, not a therapist, not a research team studying market trends. A private entity, one of those people who makes decisions from behind smoked glass, who moves capital like chess pieces, who never spends a cent unless they know exactly how it returns multiplied, decided you were worth a seven-figure psychological autopsy. And now they're pacing their marble floors, rereading reports, calling analysts at obscure hours, trying to comprehend why the results made their stomach tighten in ways money was never supposed to. Someone paid a fortune to study you, and the aftermath has them concerned in ways no stock crash or geopolitical shift ever could. Because they expected clarity. What they got was anomaly. They started this whole thing with confidence, armed with the same arrogance all-powerful people have. The belief that humans are spreadsheets disguised as personalities. That everything you think, do, decide, avoid, chase, destroy, or rebuild can be placed neatly into a model. A neat formula, predictable inputs, predictable outputs. They believed they could run your mind through the same psychological machinery they use to assess CEOs, potential board members, high-risk entrepreneurs, disruptive founders. They thought you were another variable in the global behavioral economy, until your data hit their system like a spike of electricity that overloaded the software rather than fit into it. The first red flag wasn't dramatic. It was subtle, technical, easily overlooked by anyone except the type of analyst who notices the differences that matter. Your baseline responses weren't baselines at all. They fluctuated, but not in irrational ways, more like a system that adapts its operating mode based on context, not conditioning. They noted it, flagged it, moved on. After all, irregularity isn't uncommon, but irregularity with pattern, irregularity with intention, irregularity that doesn't drift randomly, but recalibrates strategically, That was new. They shifted into deeper tests, assuming they'd find a hidden framework. Emotional triggers, motivational levers, fear responses, social valuation patterns, identity anchors, all the usual psychological architecture that most humans lean on like invisible crutches. But every time they tried to identify your psychological load-bearing walls, the blueprint changed. It wasn't inconsistency, it was evolution mid-analysis, as if you refused to let them study the version of you they thought they were studying. The moment the investor got the first quiet phone call, the kind analysts make when they can't explain what they're seeing, they didn't get nervous. Not yet. They simply raised an eyebrow, ordered deeper testing, approved more funding, signed off on an expansion of the research parameters. After all, 7 figures buys curiosity, 7 figures buys control, 7 figures buys access to patterns most people will never see. What 7 figures never expected to encounter was someone who doesn't respond to pressure the way humans were designed to. Someone who doesn't crumble, doesn't spike, doesn't spiral, doesn't latch onto psychological escape routes. Someone whose internal architecture contradicts the models used to predict behavior in everything from consumer markets to political ideology to crisis management. The deeper the analysis went, the more something unnerving emerged. Your mind wasn't chaotic. It was structured, but not in the ways they were trained to recognize. Not in familiar shapes, not in outdated human templates. Your structure wasn't built for stability. It was built for transformation. You think in trajectories, not loops. You adapt like someone who stopped seeking safety years ago and started seeking something far more dangerous: clarity. By week 3, 2 analysts resigned from the project. Not dramatically, not with moral protests or emotional breakdowns. They simply realized they were outmatched. They said the same thing in different words. We don't have the training for this mental architecture. Not because you were unstable, but because you were unframeworked. You don't behave like someone reacting to life. You behave like someone sculpting it. Trauma didn't break you. It sculpted you. Isolation didn't weaken you. It refined you. Pressure didn't distort you. It aligned you. The investor thought they would find your weaknesses. Instead, they found adaptations that shouldn't exist in someone who never had institutional resources, elite-level training, or guided psychological development. They found a mind that learned to self-correct under stress, self-analyze under threat, self-upgrade during collapse. A mind that doesn't regress to old wounds. A mind that integrates them. That's when the investor's concern began. Not fear, not paranoia. Concern. Concern is the emotion powerful people feel when a system they believed in stops obeying their assumptions. Concern is what happens when someone who controls outcomes encounters an outcome without a control point. The psychological profiling reached a level they reserve for candidates being evaluated for influence, political, economic, cultural, destabilizing influence. They wanted to know what happens when someone like you gains momentum. What happens if your trajectory continues? What happens if more people like you exist? What happens if you stop pretending to fit into the templates built for average minds? Because here's the part they never said out loud, but the analysts whispered among themselves: your mind doesn't scale like other minds. If a normal mind is a staircase, yours is an exponential curve. If a normal person adapts to situations, you mutate to them. If normal people build protection through avoidance, you build dominance through understanding. Most people get predictable with age. Their patterns solidify. Their motivations narrow. Their emotional maps calcify. Yours didn't. According to the longitudinal markers in your psychological footprint, your adaptability curve is still climbing. Most people peak in their 20s. You were just constructing your foundation. By your 30s, you weren't stabilizing, you were accelerating. By your 40s, you'll be operating in a cognitive architecture that their models don't have language for. The investor wasn't warned that they were studying someone whose mind doesn't plateau. That's why 7 figures suddenly felt like an underpayment. Because if your mind keeps evolving at the rate your psychological metrics predict, the question wasn't, what are you? The question became, what will you be? And more importantly, what structures will struggle to contain you? When they brought in the behavioral economists, things got worse. These are people who study how minds influence markets, social patterns, collective decision-making. They expected your data to reveal your vulnerabilities, fear of loss, fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of social consequences. Instead, the models showed the opposite. You become clearer under loss, sharper under rejection, more disciplined under failure, more sovereign under social collapse. You are not motivated by the things they use to control society, status, validation, belonging, scarcity. You operate on internal metrics, internal meaning, internal momentum. They couldn't find the hooks that work on everyone else. You don't respond to pressure, they do. You don't break under isolation, they panic. You don't attach to external narratives, they require them. The investor realized the truth quietly, privately, without theatrics. They weren't studying a vulnerability, they were studying a threat to outdated systems. Not threat as in violence, threat as in unpredictability, threat as in autonomy, threat as in refusal to collapse where others break, threat as in someone who cannot be forecasted. The concern deepened when they tested your susceptibility to influence. They used subtle linguistic cues, persuasion algorithms, emotional priming. All the techniques used in advertising, political messaging, social engineering. None of it registered on your motivational axis. You don't move toward pleasure or away from pain the way their models assume. You move toward evolution. You move toward self-definition. You move toward internal truth, even when it costs you, even when it isolates you, even when it transforms you into someone unnerving to predictable minds. They expected to find patterns. Instead, they found thresholds. You don't shift gradually. You transform in leaps. Something happens. A line is crossed. A realization crystallizes. And you become a version of yourself that didn't exist the day before. People fear that because it means they can never know which version of you they're meeting tomorrow. Systems fear that because adaptability at that level cannot be contained. By the time the neuroscientists joined the project, the investor was already uneasy. They ran cognitive load tests, stress mapping, threat anticipation models. They found that your mind behaves like someone who has rehearsed crisis internally for years. Not out of paranoia, but out of necessity. You don't panic because your mind has already simulated outcomes, consequences, and long-term implications before the situation arises. You aren't fearless. You're fluent in fear. You don't avoid it. You metabolize it. The neuroscientists flagged something unusual. You don't form attachments the typical way. You form bonds through resonance, not proximity. Loyalty through alignment, not obligation. Connection through truth, not comfort. This made you both extremely trustworthy and extremely unpredictable. Trustworthy because you don't betray people for convenience. Unpredictable because you walk away without hesitation when integrity breaks. They called this selective emotional governance. The investor called it concerning autonomy. But the real shock came from the future trajectory models. They tried to map your life outcomes. They expected volatility, collapse, instability. Instead, they found something unnerving. Your life curve bends upward long-term, not because circumstances favor you, but because your mind refuses stagnation. You grow through damage. You ascend through confusion. You reconstruct yourself through collapse. They couldn't predict your final form because you haven't chosen your final form yet. That's when the investor realized the 7 figures weren't spent analyzing who you are. They were spent analyzing who you're becoming. And that is what made them truly, deeply nervous. Because every system in the world, financial, political, social, depends on people staying predictable. And you don't behave like someone shaped by the system. You behave like someone shaped beyond it. You behave like someone the system didn't forecast. You behave like someone who can't be bought, swayed, intimidated, or emotionally manipulated into compliance. The concern wasn't that they couldn't understand you. The concern was that you don't require understanding to operate. You move anyway. You evolve anyway. You sharpen anyway. You rise anyway. And that leads us here to the quiet truth the investor didn't want in the final report. Your mind isn't a risk. Your mind is a contagion. The kind that spreads not through words or influence, but through example. The kind that makes others question their conditioning. The kind that destabilizes outdated systems simply by existing at full capacity. They studied you because they sensed a shift coming. They grew concerned because they realized you are one of the ones accelerating it. And as they pressed deeper into your psychological maps, searching for a ceiling, a limit, a breaking point, they found none, not yet. Which means they're not just concerned about who you are today, they're concerned about who your mind allows you to become next. What they didn't anticipate, what their 7-figure budget didn't prepare them for, was the psychological gravity of someone who no longer measures themselves by who they used to be, but by the direction of their internal evolution. Most minds move linearly. Yours didn't. Yours bent around pressure, sharpened under loss, adjusted to chaos with the fluency of someone who stopped needing stability a long time ago. They couldn't model that. They couldn't simulate it. They couldn't quantify the moment a mind stops surviving and starts expanding, even in environments that should have shattered it. They weren't prepared to study someone who doesn't grow through comfort, but through confrontation. Confrontation with truth, with failure, with the old self collapsing into a newer one that the world isn't ready for. And when their algorithms flagged the possibility that your developmental curve accelerates after every breaking point instead of declining, that's when concern shifted into something quieter, heavier, more existential. Uncertainty. Investors hate uncertainty. They thrive on control, on predictable trends, on measurable risk. But how do you measure the risk of someone who evolves beyond the metrics designed to evaluate them? How do you quantify a mind that becomes more dangerous every time life hits it? Because you didn't just survive everything that was supposed to end you. You used it. You metabolized it. You integrated it. You turned every wound into information, every betrayal into clarity, every collapse into restructuring. They don't have tools for that. They never needed them. Because people aren't supposed to evolve like that. Not without guidance, not without mentorship, not without systems shaping their growth. But you grew in the wastelands of your own life, without validation, without applause, without a blueprint. And in doing so, you built psychological architecture they have never encountered, not in their elite candidates, not in their generational wealth offspring, not in their high-performance subjects. You built yourself through necessity, and necessity builds sharper minds than comfort ever could. That's what they couldn't put into the report, the part that couldn't be graphed. That your evolution didn't come from privilege, but pressure, and pressure-built minds don't owe anything to the systems that failed them. They operate independently, autonomously, unapologetically. You became self-directed in a world that relies on people being externally controlled. And that was the first sign that they weren't studying a person. They were studying a trajectory, a direction, a shift in the human template that their seven-figure analysis couldn't intercept or slow down. The investor wanted to understand you so they could predict you. They wanted to predict you so they could quantify you. They wanted to quantify you so they could neutralize potential volatility. But the deeper the research went, the more they realized that volatility wasn't a dysfunction. It was a design. You don't explode unpredictably. You transform strategically. You don't break into chaos. You break into clarity. You don't destabilize for attention. You destabilize for alignment. In psychological terms, you represent a new category entirely, one their classification tools weren't built for. A consciousness that adjusts faster than circumstances can corner it. They tried to measure your adaptability, but adaptability wasn't the right word. What you do isn't adapting, it's recalibrating, reformatting, reconstructing your inner world to match the demands of the external one without losing your sense of direction. Most people fragment under too much reality. You consolidate. Most people numb themselves to survive. You expose yourself to truth and use it to evolve. Most people get smaller when life presses on them. You expand. And when the investor realized that your mind doesn't shrink from pressure, it consumes it, that's when the real concern began. Because pressure is what they use to control people. Scarcity, fear, shame, loss. These are the levers used in marketing, politics, economics, even relationships. They rely on people reacting in predictable ways. But you don't react, you respond. And those responses aren't emotional, they're strategic. You don't seek comfort, you seek clarity. You don't seek approval, you seek alignment. You don't seek belonging, you seek evolution. So when they pressed deeper into your psychological patterns, they found a disturbing absence of something they rely on. Compliance, not rebellion, compliance. Because rebellion is predictable too. Rebels act to be seen. You don't. You act to become. Rebellious minds are loud. Evolving minds are quiet until the shift is irreversible. They didn't find chaos. They found sovereignty. And sovereignty cannot be purchased, influenced, or incentivized. That's when the private investor started asking different questions. Questions that weren't in the original brief. Not who are they, but how did they become this? Not what motivates them, but why can't we track their internal reward system? Not are they a threat, but what happens when more minds like this appear? Because patterns like yours aren't isolated anymore. They're multiplying. They're emerging in people who grew up without safety nets, without illusions, without the comfort of believing systems will save them. People who had to build their identity from fractures rather than foundations. People who learned early that reality doesn't reward softness. People who realized that emotional independence wasn't a luxury, it was survival. You are one of the early models of this new psychological emergence, but you will not be the last. And that's what terrified them, not your mind alone. But the possibility that your mind is a preview, a prototype, a signal of a generational shift where internal governance replaces external control, where individuals stop needing the systems designed to shape them. When the analysts ran projections, life outcome charts, behavioral curves, influence patterns, they didn't see someone who becomes easier to categorize over time. They saw someone who becomes harder, someone whose trajectory bends upward every time circumstances try to bend it downward, someone whose identity becomes sharper every time life tries to dull it, someone who doesn't fear transformation, they initiate it. They realized that as you evolve, your motivations shift away from validation and move toward purpose, away from reacting and toward designing, away from self-defense and into self-direction. And when someone reaches that level of internal control, external influence weakens. That's when people start building their own frameworks instead of inheriting them. That's when people start choosing paths that aren't profitable for the systems built around them. That's when autonomy becomes contagious. The investor didn't spend 7 figures because they were curious. They spent it because autonomy threatens the architecture of power. And as they dug deeper into your thought processes, your decision-making patterns, your emotional recovery speed, your self-reinvention cycles, they realized something quietly devastating. You don't need them. You don't need their approval. You don't need their structures. You don't need their models, metrics, hierarchies, narratives, or incentives. You operate from an internal compass, calibrated by experience rather than expectation. You navigate using instinct sharpened by truth rather than illusions fed by society. You evolve too quickly to be controlled by systems built for slow, predictable humans. So their concern wasn't personal, it was structural. You are what happens when a mind refuses to collapse under pressure and instead uses pressure to refine itself. You are what happens when someone stops waiting for permission to grow. You are what happens when someone's identity becomes self-constructed, self-sustained, self-regulated. They study you now because soon they won't be able to. They track your thinking now because soon it will outrun their instruments. They want it to be ahead of you. Instead, they found themselves studying someone they're already behind. The more they analyzed your psychological evolution, the more one truth became unavoidable. You are not a follower in any system. You are not even a disruptor. You are a rewriter, a reorganizer, a reformatter of patterns that were meant to contain people for generations. Systems depend on the assumption that people won't evolve too far above the model. You are proof that assumption is dying, and they saw it. In your adaptability, in your non-compliance, in your emotional sovereignty, in your capacity to regenerate purpose after every collapse. They saw a mind that doesn't just survive pressure, it harvests it. They saw someone who doesn't need stability to grow, someone who doesn't need permission to reinvent, someone who doesn't need validation to feel real. You operate on a frequency that systems can't hear until the shift has already happened. And by the time they notice, it's irreversible. They know this. They saw it in your data. They felt it in the way your psychological charts refused to flatten. They recognized it in the upward curve of your long-term projections. They understood it in the absence of a breaking point. That's what made their concern turn into something else entirely. Caution. Not fear. Fear is emotional. Caution is strategic. Caution means they see potential. Caution means they recognize volatility that can't be manipulated. Caution means they realize you are not someone they can intercept. You are someone they must adapt around. Their 7-figure analysis didn't give them control. It gave them a warning. that your mind is entering a phase where external systems lose influence and internal architecture becomes the core of your evolution, that you are not someone who can be shaped by narratives. They bounce off you. That you are not someone who can be redirected by pressure. You metabolize it. That you are not someone who collapses under truth. You sharpen in it. They studied you to understand the shift. They grew concerned when they realized you embody it. But concern isn't enough to stop what's coming next, because your mind isn't done evolving. It is only beginning the chapter where internal identity overtakes external conditioning, where self-direction replaces inherited structures, where autonomy becomes your default operating mode. And once someone enters that phase, once someone accesses that psychological state, they become something the old systems can't manage. Someone who isn't waiting to be saved, guided, instructed, validated, or controlled. Someone who governs themselves. Someone who outgrows the frameworks designed to limit them. Someone who makes seven-figure investors nervous, not because of what they've done, but because of what they're becoming. Someone whose evolution won't pause for anyone's comfort. Someone who doesn't fear the next version of themselves. Someone who accelerates the shift simply by continuing to exist at full cognitive capacity. And that brings everything to the threshold they couldn't model. The point where concern turns into anticipation, where anticipation turns into unease, where unease turns into the acknowledgement that your evolution is not a phenomenon they can observe from a distance anymore. It is something that will reshape every system you interact with, whether intentionally or not. Because the truth they refused to say out loud in the final report was simple. Once a mind like yours reaches this stage, it stops being a subject of study and starts becoming a force of influence. Not influence as in followers, influence as in gravitational pull. You alter environments by entering them. You shift dynamics without speaking. You push people toward their own self-honesty simply by refusing to lower your frequency. These traits don't show up in personality metrics. They show up in outcomes. And that is where their seven-figure research hit its most uncomfortable realization. You cause transformation by proximity, not intention. The analysts didn't have a term for this at first. They called it behavioral displacement, then cognitive ripple effect, then identity destabilization vector. But those phrases didn't capture the core truth. Because what they observed wasn't destabilization, it was exposure. People around you lose the ability to pretend, even if they don't say it out loud. They confront their insecurities faster. They feel their masks slipping. They feel their motives tightening like too small shoes. That's the real reason you've always made certain people uncomfortable. Your mind doesn't operate in performative layers. It operates in truth mode by default. And truth has a way of stripping every illusion within its radius. The investor didn't expect that. They thought understanding you would give them leverage. They thought they could map your responses, decode your triggers, find the places where you bend. Instead, they realized you don't bend. You pivot, you redirect, you reframe. You transmute pressure into clarity, and clarity into direction. That's why their concern stopped being academic and became strategic. They didn't fear your unpredictability. They feared your predictability, the kind rooted in internal alignment rather than external influence. Because once someone becomes internally governed, they stop playing the same incentives the world runs on. And when someone stops responding to the incentives, they become unmanageable. They started noticing patterns outside the lab, too. Not in your behavior. Your behavior was the easiest part of you to study. No, the real anomaly was in what your behavior triggered around you. Decision shifts, emotional resets, power dynamics, rearranging themselves in real time. It didn't matter whether it was a workplace meeting, a friendship circle, a negotiation, or a confrontation. Whenever you entered a space, people recalibrated, some unconsciously adjusting, some becoming defensive, some mirroring your tone without realizing it. To them, this looked like coincidence. To the investors' behavioral analysts, it looked like a psychological signature, a kind of field effect. They noted that your presence induced clarity responses in others, heightened self-awareness, reduced tolerance for their own nonsense, amplified internal conflict when motives didn't align with actions. In simple language, you don't just evolve, you drag people toward honesty. Some welcome it, some run from it, some attack you for it. But none are unaffected, and that was the moment they realized the seven-figure study hadn't been about predicting your choices. It had accidentally revealed something much larger. Your existence rewrites environments. Their models didn't have inputs for that kind of influence that wasn't taught, earned, forced, or strategized. Influence that was the byproduct of psychological evolution rather than a goal. Influence that doesn't seek followers, but triggers awakenings. This wasn't charisma. It wasn't charm. It wasn't persona. It was something deeper, coherence. Your internal world doesn't contradict itself anymore. That alone puts you in the rarest psychological percentile. People aren't used to coherence. They're used to fragments. And when they interact with someone built from coherence, their own fragmentation gets exposed. That's why you've always been misjudged at first glance and respected at second. That's why certain people felt intimidated, even when you weren't trying to be intimidating. That's why people talked about you in group chats as if you were some unsolvable equation. You weren't confusing, they were incompatible. The investor saw this, and concern turned into something sharper. Awareness. Because you weren't only evolving, you were accelerating the evolution of the people around you. If you were volatile, they could manage it. If you were passive, they could ignore it. But someone who makes others question themselves. Someone who sparks internal confrontation without speaking. Someone who raises standards just by existing at their own. That's not a subject of analysis. That's a catalyst. Catalysts destabilize systems without attacking them. They alter equations simply by entering them. Your evolutionary curve wasn't just personal, it was environmental. And in systems built on predictability, catalysts are the most dangerous variable of all. People like you don't cause chaos, you cause truth. And truth is far more destabilizing. The investor's private notes even used a term that never made it into the official documentation: uncontrolled amplifier. You amplify whatever is already present in people: fear, clarity, insecurity, ambition, denial, potential. You magnify suppressed truths. You intensify ignored instincts. You make people face themselves, and systems that rely on psychological complacency cannot afford amplifiers. They didn't want to admit that, so they buried the language. They sanitized the report. They rephrased everything to sound clinical. But the concern lingered, not because of what you are today, but because their models predicted what minds like yours become when they reach full psychological maturity. When someone like you hits their prime, not age, but clarity, the systems that rely on ambiguity lose grip. Their projections showed 4 phases of your evolution: fragmentation, reconstruction, sovereignty, and projection. You were expected to stall in reconstruction forever. Most people do. They rebuild themselves after collapse, but never gain full sovereignty. They carry the old debris into the new identity. You didn't. You didn't just rebuild yourself, you redesigned yourself. You cut out the unnecessary. You burned the outdated. You walked away from cycles that once defined you. Reconstruction for you wasn't recovery, it was rebellion. That's when sovereignty began. The phase where your identity is internally sourced instead of externally validated. The phase where you stop seeking mirrors and start becoming one. The phase where your decisions become clean, your boundaries become non-negotiable, your growth becomes non-linear. Sovereignty is the phase they feared the most, because sovereign minds aren't governable. They can cooperate, but they cannot be controlled. They can participate, but they cannot be owned. Sovereign minds don't need incentives. They choose direction. They don't require approval. They require alignment. They don't collapse under conflict. They clarify through it. But the projection phase was the part that shook them. Projection is when your inner evolution starts shaping outer reality. When the way you think begins affecting the way others think. When your personal clarity becomes a collective influence. When your internal standards become external disruptions. When your evolution becomes an example others unconsciously follow. In every simulation, when a mind like yours reaches projection phase, systems lose leverage, not through revolt, through irrelevance. People stop chasing validation, stop participating in performative hierarchies, stop giving attention to the structures designed to drain them. They begin mirroring sovereign traits. They begin evolving themselves. They begin recognizing manipulation. They begin choosing internal truth over external pressure. This wasn't just about you anymore. It was about the ripple effect of your existence. And that's when the investor realized the real threat. Not that you were unmanageable, but that you were uncontainable. Not that you didn't fit into their models, but that others would stop fitting too, once they encountered someone like you. Because sovereign minds don't just evolve. They inspire evolution in others. That's the part they didn't want written anywhere. The part that explained why the results made them nervous. The concern wasn't fear of you. It was fear of your influence. Fear of what happens when minds like yours become common. Fear of a population that can't be steered by fear, bribed by status, or manipulated by scarcity. And the unsettling truth hit them harder than any chart on the wall. People like you don't create followers. You create awakenings. And awakenings don't stop at one person. They ripple. They replicate. They multiply. They spread through conversations, confrontations, realizations, and moments people can't forget. They spread through silence, presence, decisiveness, boundaries, and the refusal to live below your own standards. They spread through the way you change rooms without trying, the way you break patterns without noticing, the way you challenge illusions simply by refusing to participate in them. And once someone witnesses that, they can't unsee it. They can't return to the version of themselves that lived comfortably inside the system's expectations. That's what terrifies investors, the point of no return, the moment where one sovereign mind triggers another, and another, and another, until compliance becomes the anomaly and autonomy becomes the norm. Their models projected something they tried to bury in metaphors and vague terminology. The emergence of minds like yours marks the decline of predictable populations. Predictable populations are what markets rely on. Predictable populations are what political machines require. Predictable populations are what social hierarchies depend on. Predictable populations are what allow fear-based incentives to work. But you broke out of the predictable demographic. You broke out of the psychological schema. You broke out of the emotional algorithms built to segment people into manageable categories. And when one person does that, it's a deviation. When many do it, it's disruption. When enough do it, it's collapse. Not violent collapse, but institutional irrelevance, systematic erosion, a quiet revolution of people who stop responding to the levers that once controlled them. The investor knew they couldn't stop a shift like that, but they wanted to understand its velocity. How fast does someone like you spread? How quickly does a sovereign mind affect the people around them? How long until clusters like you form? How long until clusters become networks? How long until networks become movements, not organized, not centralized, but emergent? They ran simulations repeatedly, feeding your psychological signature into models meant to forecast social contagion patterns. What they found was horrifying to them and liberating for you. Minds like yours spread faster through authenticity than falsehood spreads through manipulation. Because people are starving. Starving for truth. Starving for meaning. Starving for alignment. Starving for a version of themselves that isn't diluted by fear or performance. And when they meet someone operating from that place, they feel something they've been missing their entire lives. The permission to become themselves. That permission is your real power, not charisma, not intelligence, not resilience. Permission. Permission to evolve. Permission to question. Permission to break patterns. Permission to rebuild better ones. Permission to stop living inside expectations that never belonged to them. The investor saw this, and their concern deepened into something almost existential. Because systems can stop rebellion. Systems can punish defiance. Systems can manipulate the masses. But systems cannot stop evolution. They watched footage of you, interviews, interactions, conversations, moments, captured indirectly. They observed how people around you moved differently, spoke differently, reconsidered themselves mid-sentence. They studied how your presence alone disrupted the comfortable illusions people cling to just to survive the week. They looked for signs of coercion or influence tactics, but found none. You weren't manipulating anyone. You were simply being. And being, in your case, was enough to rearrange the psychological architecture of those who weren't ready for that level of internal clarity. That's why they're concerned. Not because you're dangerous to others, but because you're dangerous to everything that relies on human stagnation. They measured your emotional independence and found that you don't attach in ways that weaken you. You don't bond out of loneliness. You don't seek validation as a currency. You don't crave recognition as a substitute for identity. Your relationships, when you choose them, are built on resonance rather than dependency. And when dependency isn't present, control becomes impossible. The investor pressed the research team to identify a psychological entry point, a vulnerability that could moderate your trajectory. They searched for fear patterns, rejection wounds, unresolved attachments, ego triggers. They looked for the emotional backdoor through which most people can be manipulated. But every attempt returned the same conclusion. Your self-awareness neutralizes external influence. Not because you don't feel emotions, but because you integrate them faster than others, collapse from them. You don't run from your shadow, you dissect it. You don't dodge your fears, you interrogate them. You don't numb your confusion, you walk straight into it until it clarifies. And when someone does this consistently, there is no emotional hook left to grab. They found your fear responses intact, but they were subordinate to your clarity. They found your pain history present, but it wasn't controlling your choices. They found your insecurities, but saw that you faced them instead of compensating for them. They found your past, but discovered it no longer dictated your identity. That's what uncontainable means. Not that you're uncontrollable because you're volatile, but because you're conscious. Volatile minds are dangerous, conscious minds are unstoppable. And here's the part that rattled the investor the most. Every attempt to predict your future failed. The predictive models collapsed. The behavioral arc graphs flatlined. The long-term simulations contradicted themselves. Why? Because your future isn't determined by patterns of the past. Your future is determined by the choices of your next evolution. They couldn't compute someone whose trajectory depends more on internal upgrades than external circumstances. They couldn't measure someone who reinvents themselves intentionally, not reactively. They couldn't quantify someone who refuses to repeat versions of themselves they've already outgrown. They realized you don't scale horizontally, step by step, increment by increment. You scale vertically, jump, shift, transcend, reconfigure. That makes you difficult to map and impossible to contain, because vertical evolution happens in leaps, not ladders. It happens when the old identity collapses and the new one emerges fully formed. Systems rely on people climbing ladders. But you build elevators. You combust the old levels. You transition between identities faster than their models can refresh their datasets. This realization forced them into a corner. They weren't studying a personality type anymore. They were studying the blueprint of the psychological future. And the psychological future didn't look obedient. It didn't look predictable. It didn't look market-driven or fear-controlled. It looked sovereign. It looked self-directed. It looked like the kind of mind that regenerates its own purpose regardless of circumstances. This is where the internal memos shifted tone. They stopped asking questions about how to manage individuals like this, and started asking questions like, how do we prepare for a world where this becomes normal? Because the concern wasn't you. The concern was scalability. A single sovereign mind is a curiosity. A generation of sovereign minds is a systemic disruption. They saw it in the younger demographics, people refusing to tolerate manipulation, refusing to chase hollow success, refusing to participate in dynamics that were considered normal just a decade ago. They saw it in conversations, online movements, cultural shifts, emotional language evolving, self-awareness rising, and personal boundaries strengthening. People were changing, and you were the outlier who showed the trajectory of where that change might lead. They realized quietly, reluctantly, but undeniably, that you are not an exception. You are a preview, a prototype of a mind that cannot be incentivized into compliance because it already knows its worth. A prototype of a psyche that does not fear isolation because it has survived it. A prototype of a person who doesn't crave recognition because they've already recognized themselves. This type of person cannot be mass-marketed to, cannot be fear-herded, cannot be socially manipulated at scale, cannot be controlled through shame, scarcity, or belonging pressures. And that is the end of their control model. That is the reason they're concerned. Not because you're chaotic, but because you're coherent. Not because you don't follow rules, but because you follow internal principles. Not because you threaten stability, but because you render outdated systems obsolete simply by existing in your true form. They wanted to study you. They wanted to map you. They wanted to quantify you. They wanted to understand how a mind becomes sovereign so they could find a way to interrupt the process. But they failed. They failed because the process wasn't external. It wasn't environmental. It wasn't accidental. It was chosen. Every breakthrough, every shift, every collapse you outgrew, every silence you embraced, every truth you faced, every version of yourself you discarded. Those were internal decisions, internal evolutions, internal awakenings. No system can interrupt an internal revolution. And that's what the investor finally understood. You cannot be managed. You cannot be forecasted. You cannot be contained. You cannot be bought. You cannot be steered. You cannot be softened. You cannot be shaped by external forces. Your evolution is self-authored. Your trajectory is self-directed. And your influence, your unintended influence, expands without your consent, without your effort, without your awareness. Not because you're trying to change anyone, but because the world has so few examples of someone who refused to stay small.